Okay, so good afternoon, officially 5 o'clock on April the 8th, 2024. And I want to I was talking about this with some people before, but I want this as a reminder that if you're supposed to be attending face to face, make sure you attend face to face unless you let me know. And especially that's important for our international students because they ask me from time to time, who shows up face to face, and because we have a separate face to face program and a separate online program. And so just make sure, hey, Dr. M, I'm not going to be here, letting you know, and just let you know. And that's especially important with international students. Is that correct, Tony? Yeah, so international students required to show up face to face. And I want to make sure that's clearer if I haven't made it clear already. Make it clear already because I get asked about that every semester and I don't lie. I think I'm nice, but I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie about that stuff. I'm not gonna get in trouble with that stuff as well. So and just make sure we've got all that there as well. All right, today we're going to talk about metadata because I kind of bring that up because someone asked about that. So today we're going to talk about metadata. We're going to talk a lot about my dissertation. Some of the really good things that I saw, I really like the GERS, the Graduate and Undergraduate Research Symposium. And one of the things I really liked was that people were taking the skills and the techniques learned here, and they were doing things with other folks, like Dr. Uma upstairs or Dr. O'Brien over in nutritional sciences. So I was really impressed with some of the maps that I saw that are going to cross-pollinate with the other things that we're doing on campus here. I really like some of the things that we did with Dr. Yang and Dr. Bang. Those were really kind of interesting. I really like those with the application of big spatial data, statistics, some of the things you're doing there with what you're doing here. And to be honest with you, I was impressed is probably a light term to use. I really like what you were doing. I like it. I think it's impressive that people are picking up the soft skills and presenting themselves professionally, everyone dressed nice, look good. Make sure you show up on time for these things. That is important. One of the things I'm sure you notice after taking this class is I don't like tardiness and lateness, and I think it reflects negatively on you because it just does. It just does. And I had a mother growing up who was always late and a nice lady and all, but it was just always late and always got on my nerves. And so if you're kind of chronically late, that's kind of a poor reflection as opposed to always being on time. So if something does come up, you've got the personal equity invested with people so that, hey, something really did come up instead of it being the rule instead of the exception. And that's kind of some of my personal things about some of the presentation skills. So make sure when you're at these presentations, you're there on time beforehand. Okay, you're loading up the computer and all that other good stuff. So I that's important. Have the poster printed out, ready to go. Not the morning of, but the night before. And my Friday and the end of last week, I was off campus a lot and I had to be at home a lot. So it was important that either you hit me up or your professors learned how to print on the print these things out because I'm not really sure why I'm the poster gatekeeper or whatever. So I'm not sure why. And I appreciate the people who actually plugged it in and Googled the directions and figured out how to do it themselves, which is, I think, a better, a good reflection of you compared to other folks. And other folks had logistical issues and things like that. So there were a number of people that I did print it out for and don't mind doing so. So I'm not speaking to anyone like that, especially people coming from a distance or whatever. So I think all the problem solving skills that go above and beyond the technical stuff here, I really like that. You know, I like that people are representing themselves well out there. You know, we get a lot of positive comments. I think we probably had about a dozen people present from our department and people taking the classes from our department. Of the 62 posters, I think we had about 2 or 3 oral presentations, and everyone looked good, sounded professional, you know. And so I was just impressed, impressed. And I look forward to kind of people taking this stuff off campus at some of the different forums that we're looking to go to. Some of the things I'm looking to do is I'm taking someone to Transportation Resource Board conference. She's actually sitting in the back working on another class there. Hi, Lamont. How's it going? We're looking to take 2 students there as part of something called the Minority Scholars Program. And then I'm starting to get more involved in something called CDAG, Southeast Division of the Association of American Geographers. And that's basically in the Southeast. So I've taken students to that before, which is focused on geography. So whether it's gun deaths or food accessibility or AIML techniques or, solar radiation, some of the things that Tony was doing with Dr. Bang, those are all the things related to geography. Because at the end of the day, when we look at talk about a geography conference, what's the underlying theme of a geography conference?
Yeah.
Geography, exactly. But what's geography the study of, Barbara?
The study of maps, land.
Maps and where stuff is. Whether it's solar radiation or food deserts or gun deaths at the state scale or whatever, the underlying theme is people show up and look at maps and spatial analysis and what you can do with those. And so I think that those presentations are kind of ripe with that. That's in November in Greenville. Since I'm kind of being a little more heavily involved in that, I would love to take people for that. There's also, as part of that, a graduate student paper competition that you need to submit papers by, I think, mid-September or something like that. But 3,000 word papers, which you can use as the beginning of your master's thesis, senior capstone, your PhD dissertation or whatever. And so some of the things that I really like are that people aren't kind of doing multiple things, or that you're using the skills in this class to build on what you're going to do for your dissertation. Because I know PhD, they're not these big 150 page, dissertations, no more. They're starting to require, 2 or 3 papers. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm asking the PhD people, yeah. But they're requiring, peer-reviewed papers in journals, because that's what we all care about. To keep my job, I need to get those published. And so these are really good starts to doing that. Really good starts to doing that. So I implore people to kind of present at some of these local things here. You win a paper competition at CDAG, I bet you it's going to count as a peer-reviewed publication. You got something just knocked out already, and a lot of people in this class already have something ready to go. We've got something called the North Carolina Geographer, ncgeographer.org. They're looking for papers. They're soliciting papers right now. A lot of people have the basis for something that's ready to go out the door pretty soon. It's peer reviewed, got a really low hanging fruit. And so it's not going to go through the rigor of something like the Journal of Agriculture and Food Security, the Journal of Rural Studies that we've published in before. And so you can kind of knock one of those out pretty quickly and pretty easily. I don't want to word easily, none of this stuff is easy. So those are kind of some of the soft skills things I'm talking about. But lo and behold, impressed what I saw. Look forward to, kind of taking off with some of these things. If you see some local conferences and workshops, feel free, hit your advisor up, hit me up. I can cut you a stipend for the day to go and spend the night there or whatever. I'm cutting people $300 checks here, $500 checks here to go and do these things because I hate processing travel stuff. So I'll just cut you a check to go do some of this. Local is better. Me, I'm going to Hawaii next week, but that's because I want to go to Hawaii. Just kidding. But I don't get a lot of bang for the buck sending students to Hawaii. Sending me to Hawaii makes my wife happy and all the good stuff and get rid of the kids. But sending you to North Carolina GIS Conference or CDAG or NASA Space Grant and all those other things, I can send a dozen students for the cost of like a plane ticket to San Diego to send someone out there. And so we're really intentional about making sure you can interface with people locally, and these are going to be the people that are going to be hiring you and your future colleagues and people that are going to be working for you or you working for them. And so really take advantage of these, opportunities. I'm for people to do so. And I think I'm really impressed by what I see, inside the classroom. I like it, but outside of the classroom, I like it even more. I'm even more impressed. So today we're going to talk about metadata. Okay, so week number 11, metadata. Next week, I posted an assignment, and I'll talk about that at the end. It's basically a NASA course NASA course. And like I said before, I'm not going to be here next week. And then in 2 weeks, and I'll post that, all we're going to do is have the final exam for graduate students. So 2 weeks, final exam for graduate students. If you presented at GERS, you don't need to worry about it. Yeah, that was your final exam, because I know how much work Barbara put into it. I know how much work Chantel put in. I know what Andy did. He does a lot of it. Okay. So if you presented at GERS, you've taken your final. So we'll talk about what that final is going to entail. It's going to entail a VB program, Python program, and something about open data. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So any of the graduate students, undergraduate students, all you have to worry about is the final project. And some people have presented some really neat ideas. The big thing about that final project is it's tough to make it 12 to 15 minutes, because we like to talk and talk and talk and talk. And, you hear me here gesticulating and talking, so much, but making it intentional for 12 to 15 minutes. And those were some of the really good things about the presentations, is that I'm going to go to AAG next week. It's the Association of American Geographers, where that CDAG is focused on the Southeast, where that people spend 10 of their 15 minutes talking about why their paper is so important, and then we spend 5 minutes talking about the methodology, results, and conclusion. And that's a big thing where you spend 2/3 of your time telling me why this is so important, and you never really get to the part of, this is all the cool stuff I did. And I think that's really good. I'll kind of pick on or point out Sarah there, where she got into the definition of a hub. We're talking about this ArcGIS online hub, which is basically a web page to share data resources and ideas. At the end of the day, we got in because the hub could be applied to anything. And this is what Andy's also working on as well. So we got in, it's on water quality education. We jumped directly into what's a hub, what are we doing with it, and then some of the analytics and results that we talk about. Because at the end of the day, people want to look at the little bullet points and say, this is what I want to prove or disprove, and what I show. And some of these are pretty easy. I just want to map where gun death rates are the highest, or where food accessibility is the highest. Where's African American population coincide with our food deserts? And there were definite spatial correlations with those. And we didn't even take it off with the two-tailed t-test or the correlations or any of those other things there, but we just saw spatial similarities with those. And we can answer the why questions later in your dissertation or thesis or whatever we want to do with those. And so I really like those when it comes to those presentations. Hopefully everyone will kind of take those for the final. There's a lot of neat things out there. I think some people are going to look at the Vital Statistics database and show us how to parse data. And selfishly, I want us to share knowledge. You just showing it to me, it's cool, it's great, you kind of check the box, but you being able to share your knowledge with everyone, I think it's going to be impressive, because at the end of the day, what I want is, I want to learn something from you. You teach me how to do something, because in this world of GIS, this isn't 2005 anymore, where I think I'm the smartest person in the room with GIS. I'm not. We got the online GIS, we got the cloud stuff, we've got the collectors, we got the hub technology. Today we're going to be talking about metadata for ArcGIS Pro, and Esri hasn't even created a metadata tutorial yet in the training package. So we're kind of going into this kind of flying blind a little bit. So we're going to talk about some of the metadata, how to access it, because it's totally different in this incarnation of GIS software compared to the last one, which was called ArcCatalog. And the way to programmatically access some of these things is going to be neat. We're going to do some Python today. So We really will. But it's going to be fairly easy when it talks about assessment and evaluation. And so I'll do a little presentation and then we'll kind of get into that. But we're going to look at we're going to look at my dissertation here. And so if, like I said, do not read this before driving or, you know, if you need to get to sleep. But all kidding aside was I had worked for the military at a place called Fort A.P. Hill. I think it's called Fort Walker now in Central Virginia. And I was kind of in charge of data development and metadata because the three words people don't want to answer, you know, don't want to say to their bosses, I don't know. And so we worked with about 100 military installations. And my boss would say, hey, we're planning trips for the next year. What military installation do we need to visit? Which one has the oldest data? Which one doesn't have complete metadata? And when we start working with the metadata editor after my talk here, you're going to see it's really hard to go and access all the individual metadata elements. And so I thought, hey, why don't we write some programming? Back in the day, it wasn't Python. It was something called ArcObjects, which is an offshoot of something called Visual Basic. Let's use Visual Basic to just pull from these and stick them into an Excel spreadsheet so I could just look to see, hey, this metadata isn't there. This was created in 2002. This was created in 1996. This has none. We don't even know this. So it's sitting there in one place. And we could do this for one military installation versus the other 99. So we could facilitate data-driven decision-making. And I did this for the military. And then I left that job and started my PhD at UNCG. And guess what my dissertation was on? It was on this. And so these things build upon each other. So I didn't really write I didn't do a new dissertation. I just built on my work. I probably did 70% of it was new because I had to go and research and write it. And I did it in an open source environment, but I had already started this stuff years in the making. So that's what I kind of talk about. These posters and these presentations and these papers that you give in class, make sure these kind of build up and they just don't go into that vault right there or that silo and just stay there. You know, so build these things up. So when you write your introduction, you've already done the introduction somewhere else. And so this is my dissertation. I transferred in some credits from George Mason University in Northern Virginia, but I started this program in 2007, a fall, and I graduated in December 2009. So I was there for 5 semesters. 5 semesters. So I took classes for a whole year because that's all the money I had. Because I was coming down when the housing market was pretty good. So I was able to buy a place, got my kid into school, and I could live for a year just doing that. And then I had to get a job. And then I just did the rest of the dissertation for the next year and a half after that. And the thing that I did, and I don't know how people work, but think about what makes you work best. And what I did every night was I went, put my kid to bed, and then I would work from 8 to 10 o'clock. Just work from 8 to 10 o'clock for 2 hours. And, 18 months later, I had written this is 250 pages, but 150 pages of text, and then about 100 pages of code. And so this was kind of consistent. And during that time, I ran a half marathon. And like the week after I graduated, I ran a marathon, ran a 3:30 marathon. So I was training for marathons and doing all that other stuff. So it was pretty fun. I wasn't really a big TV watcher or Stranger Things or whatever kids watch these days. I don't know what the kids watch, but I wasn't a binge watcher, but really intentional about my time and committing this to it. So, a lot of times, we've got a couple students in our program who haven't finished up a 20-page paper, and they've been here like 6-7 years. And so really figure out, commit the time management, what's the best way that works for you. During COVID, when I lived in a real small house, I'd wake up at like 4 a.m, go running, be back at 5, and then work for 2 hours before my kids woke up because I was working from home and my wife was working, utilities since she was a necessary worker, essential worker. That was the essential worker. So I'd work and then put them down for a nap and work, put them down for a nap, couple of naps. They were still napping a couple of times a day. So that's when I would work. And in the morning, I'd work really well. So this was my dissertation here. I liked it. It's, a lot of times people get these kind of delusions of grandeur. But the other thing that you want to do is make sure this is going to be something. And I think Dr. McGinn and I have kind of, joked about it more recently, is that this thing has a little bit of technical rigor, and when you write a dissertation, you could be on anything that you want, but you want to show that you're kind of technically proficient, and we've seen at UNCG dissertations on things like, sacred places and things like that, but not a lot of rigor, not a lot of an analysis that I think higher committees that are going to say, hey, we need you to teach research methods. We need you to teach stats. We need you to teach GIS, because GIS and data analysis is pretty much part and parcel of everything here, right? Isn't it? It's kind of everywhere. Anything with GIS, all of our classes have some type of GIS. And so, I don't want to toot GIS horn, but has some type of rigor, whether it's spatial analysis or remote sensing or working with data or utilizing data, even your urban geography class or whatever you talk about there. And so make sure this dissertation has that. And the things that I've seen from everyone definitely and unequivocally has that. So this is my dissertation here. It's on metadata. Metadata is data about data. And so I'll talk a little bit about it. There's a lot of value in it, but you're going to notice really quickly it's really boring. Who wants to write data about data? And then I'm going to talk a little about metadata, like data about the data about the data. Talk about boring, and talk about boring. But these are things that people need. And I don't want to use the word, sexy or whatever, but it's not the sexiest subject. But at the end of the day, this is what people need and want, because you don't want to go to your boss at the NCDOT and say, I don't know, I don't know when these data were created. And so right now, some of the things we're doing with the hub is that we're creating metadata templates so that we can put words up there. I want to type in the word coastline, anything with the word coastline or county or whatever. And I know Chima, he's got another project that we're working on with Region 7 Health Mapping District. We're putting keywords in there so that we can have those there so that you can search on those. You can go to the Google machine in our hub and it'll find those. So I don't want to talk too much more, but I'm going to talk a little bit about metadata. We're going to look at something specifically called the North Carolina Local and State Government Metadata Standard. And then we'll look at ArcGIS Pro a little bit, and then we'll open up the project. I'll talk about the project a little bit. I basically did the whole project already, but I just want you to be able to kind of go through and edit the code a little bit, because we're going to be looking at metadata objects today. And so separate metadata objects, and maybe a call to arms for a couple of people who really want to take off with it, because I'm still working on finding ways to navigate all forms of metadata without getting too technical and exporting and all these other things, because I made a really cool tool with the previous version of ArcGIS Pro, and I can't seem to replicate it in Python in the new version of ArcGIS Pro. So I'm a little bit frustrated by that. So I'll talk a little bit about this here, but this is my introduction to metadata. This is part of a project that we've kind of we got with the NCDOT, and that state and local government profile is going to be the major deliverable with that. And I'll talk about the person that we hired on with that. But when we talk about data facts, most data have a spatial element. This is how we go and create data: GPS units, download, even back in the day, scanning. When I worked with the military, we had these big binders right here, which someone went and surveyed at one point in time that I could read into a GIS using something called COGO, coordinate geometry. And so why is metadata, why is it so important, is that we can tell which feature classes are represented. What is this? These are parcels, these are roads, these are, I don't know what these things are. And so we need to give this data information to decide whether the data set is suitable for your purpose, both spatially, temporally, and as well as when we can start looking at data sources. Did I create these things using my phone GPS, or did I use them using a better GPS, or were they extracted from imagery from 2001 or 2022? So there's a lot of things about metadata. Now we see metadata all the time. I think I talk about this where that we can see this is just basic information about metadata. And so when we look at a crime database right here, this is DUIs in Winston-Salem. What are the questions that you have about this? When was it created? How'd you create it? Where'd you get it from? Are these arrests or people get pulled over for it? Even when we look at the crime data for Durham, well, they have things like abandoned cars. Is that really a crime or is it an incident? And does that incident turn into arrest? Because sometimes a lot more of the arrests happen at the police station, but that's not really truly reflective of that. So metadata helps answer some of those questions like who created it? What time period are these? Because sometimes we want to do temporal analysis. I don't want to pick on Lamana again because she's just visiting, but we're looking at motor vehicle thefts over time. So we're going to look at 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23. So it's really important that we create and retain data that has temporal. Auto vehicle crimes 2019, auto vehicle crimes 2020. 2021. So we have a good idea as to what they are that are not only reflected in the title, but are also reflected in the metadata. So we can look at all this information about, well, how'd you create the data? It looks like these were probably just geocoded at the block, and we can do those fairly easily. When were they published? What software did we use? Who created the information about the data set? Are there any use or distribution constraints on these? Now, in a day and age of open and fair data, you better have good reason why there's access and use constraints on those. These papers that we publish these days, they want a disclaimer that says this is where you can download the data. If you or you or you or you want to go and do the exact same thing that I did instead of it sitting on a computer right there and email me for it and I'll send you the encrypted, no more of that stuff, especially in a day and age of fair and open data where the other people are paying for your research and your students. Who's in charge of distributing these data? How can you get these? How do I get in touch with these? Metadata is the information about the content, quality, condition, and other characteristics of the data. And to me, it largely describes the structural, administrative, and descriptive information about a data set. Now, there's about 410 different elements that go to metadata, and they've largely evolved since 1994. But things like what's the contact information, the time period, the data sources, the parameters. This is what I did. So data about data, and we'll talk a little bit about metadata. When we open up ArcGIS Pro and we open up the week 11, we can look at right mouse click, look at the metadata, and see it all there. Now, metadata sits there in paper maps where we look at the dates and the source and the producer. So we do see rudimentary forms of metadata. And when you right mouse click, or you go to your phone right here, it has a little map and it shows you like when the picture was taken and all that other good stuff, right? That's metadata too. We do this with our drone imagery. You right mouse click and click on properties. There are going to be properties specific to that JPEG image. Just, basically when we fly a drone, this is all we do. Just fly it up there and just start taking pictures right there. But the drone actually collects extra properties like the lat, the long, the elevation, the type of camera, all this other stuff that's above and beyond my skill set to go through and do this. And so metadata documents all types of information. We try to have it adhere to something called ISO, and I alluded to that before. Those are International Standards Organization. You'll see some of these acronyms: NSDI, National Spatial Data Infrastructure, Federal Geographic Data Committee, and then this content standard for digital geospatial metadata. You don't have to memorize all of these, okay? Because you can get into the weeds in metadata. And it's harder and harder because Esri hasn't even created the training for the latest and greatest versions of this. So I think there's going to be some really neat things kind of coming out there. Why do we use metadata? Development costs are low. We just don't want to repeat stuff. And so I can go to my hub and type in counties, and let's see if there's a counties outline there instead of me having to go search for it. It's, one of the only reasons. Or water quality. And our hub project is specific to water quality education, but we're hoping to build that out in our code database where everyone in the department's kind of contributing it to it. And I kind of have Shima just basically putting stuff up there and kind of doing some redundant and boring work. But hopefully the long-term investment with that is that, well, he's not going to have to go, or you're not going to have to go, or my next TA is not going to have to go and download the data again because it's sitting there in a hub that has a dedicated URL to it instead of it's sitting on my computer and sitting on my computer. So to me, metadata is kind of part of data. It's created during data development. It's populated with rich content. So I think more recently we've tried to think long and hard about what's going to go into the metadata. Now, the ArcGIS Online metadata that we have is pretty rudimentary, but it's got keywords, descriptions, titles that are going to be specific to all of these, because we want to use metadata when we move from single to a multiple user environment. The days of just my stuff sitting on my computer are over. I need probably to accept that a lot more than you all, because this was made for 20 years. And now I'm forced to work with clouds and enterprise databases, all this other stuff. And so I need to share with people what I'm doing, because I don't want to go and download the same data all the time. I just want to publish it to my hub and have it ready to go there. Are you ready to go there? So I can just say, open up the hub. Just go to my organization, project's there, instead of me texting it to you or sending it to you or emailing it to you. So there's a lot of reasons why we have metadata. I think seeing or trying to look at the value of metadata is still kind of trying to be realized. But when you go and work for an organization like the NCDOT, you're going to need to use it, because the next thing I'm going to talk about is a project that we did with the NCDOT where we created a metadata standard specific to the state of North Carolina. And I'll talk about that student a little bit here, but we can add access constraints, resolution, how did you collect that? Now, these things are always changing. So the metadata standards for 1994 are slightly different now, because now I just use that fancy word URL. What's a URL? What's a URL? Universal Resource Locator. But what's that mean? The little HTTP thing with all that stuff at the end. And so anything that I publish is going to have a unique one of those compared to anything else in the world. And so previous versions of resources didn't have those. They were just sitting in a little database. So I could publish it. And so now URL. What are other ways that we collect data that we didn't maybe 20 years ago? What are newer ways of collecting data? I'm looking at you specifically.
I feel like on the individual level, or the use of cell phones, where we
Cell phones, exactly.
go to the store.
Drones, these little scanning things that you go through at Food Line or whatever, and especially if it's spatial, it's, but the drone imagery, when did we collect that? What data did we collect it? How did we process it? Hey, I used drone to map on this date to process it, because you notice sometimes you get garbage that comes out of it. So people are going to want to know where that garbage comes from, or noise or whatever. And so how current are the data? What's the contact information, distribution policies, this URL thing that I was talking about here. And so these are some of the things that I was kind of talking about. I'm not going to go through all 46 slides here. Okay, but we can look for data by, temporal data, and we can look at repeatable processes here. One of the things that I do want to talk about is the North Carolina local and state profile, okay? And this is one thing that I worked on with the NCDOT. This is one thing that I NCDOT where that I was on some ad hoc metadata committee. Has anyone heard the term ad hoc before? What's it mean?
It's like,
I don't know Latin, but I know what ad hoc means.
temporary.
Temporary, just on the fly. And at some point in time, a guy named Jeff over at the North Carolina Geographic Information Coordinating Council said, we're going to create a committee so that we're going to figure out what are the standards for the state and local government. Jeff has since retired, but what's going to be standard? So when we put stuff into North Carolina One Map, NC One Map, that we can connect to through services, or we can go and download their stuff. They have consistent metadata. So I can type in the word schools or swine lagoons and put that stuff up there. In some cases, they don't have it up there. I can type in the word parcels. I can download parcels or imagery or connect to imagery, which is probably a little bit easier. But I made a proposal with the NCDOT since someone was on that committee, and they gave us about $96,000 so that we could do that. Now, $96,000 pays for a grad student for 2 years. And guess what I hired? I hired a grad student to work on this. Now, the one thing about this grad student is they didn't like metadata. I don't like metadata. So I'm going to do my dissertation or thesis on something totally different. And so guess what happened? They did a lot of work. So they worked on this and then they worked on this, And so some of the things, really talk about is don't duplicate your efforts. I got Chima working on something called Region 7 Health Mapping District. It's probably not the sexiest or, the funnest thing to do, but it's going to get your thesis and it's going to get your dissertation and it pays you. And if you want to do something totally different, and he can, but it's a lot of work. And I think the student who did this learned a lot about metadata and learned a lot about some other stuff too. And I think they kind of duplicate, if you want to do something slightly different and use the same techniques. And so just be careful about that because, they heard the word metadata, pay for graduate education, but I'll do it, but I don't want to do this. And so maybe at the end, I probably should have hired someone that actually wanted to do metadata, which was really hard because, no one really likes metadata, but it had, but I think they duplicated a lot of efforts right there. Now, we worked with the NCGICC, North Carolina Geographic Information Coordinating Council. These are people who just run GIS for the state of North Carolina. And then if you're familiar with the state here, or if you've been to North Carolina One Map before, nconemap.gov, North Carolina is kind of the top 5, top 10 of states in terms of being organized at the state level and requirements and having online data repositories. And every other year, they run the North Carolina GIS Conference. And I think Chima's presented there before, Sarah's presented there before. I think I brought about 8 students there. I really like it because you go and meet professionals there. And they talk largely not about the different projects, but the different types of technologies and the different types of things that they're doing. So Department of Cultural Resources, NCDOT, EPA, the photogrammetry unit. We have 2 students from this department who work over the photogrammetry unit who basically collect all the satellite imagery so that we can make decisions with transportation planning and all that other good stuff. So a lot of this stuff like metadata and data standards, even though it's mundane, this is a lot of the stuff that you're going to be working with out in the field. The guns and all those other things, maybe you're working for advocacy or policy or whatever there, but most of us are going to be, I'm going to be putting together all the layers that make up this map. And this map probably takes 2 days to make, but it takes 3 weeks to go in GPS and download and digitize all the data that goes into this. And it'll take another half day to create the metadata for it. And so all the cool analysis and cartography really isn't much compared to kind of some of the mundane things that we need to deal with when we create this. And metadata is part and parcel of that. So we were kind of on this committee right here, and the graduate student was there, but what information do you need? And so these were taken from different standards. You'll see these big fancy words like 19115, 19115-1, 19115-3, services, geographic services, which are going to be residing on external servers. But we kind of used all of this information to figure out what's the stuff that people are going to populate, because after this project, I got another student named Richie, who he wrote a nice big metadata assessment tool to figure out what stuff matched up with this. And we wrote it to a web page and stuck it in a CSV file, and I haven't been able to replicate it in ArcGIS Pro since. So, but I'm going to show that project here in a little bit because it's really neat. Now, am I going to know it's right? Do I know it was created on March 1st, 2003? I don't know. I'm not really sure about that, but I know that the format's going to be correct. Hey, they started with a 2, they started with a 1. They're not starting the year that starts with a 3 because, well, we're not in the 3000s yet. Not for another 1,000 years. So we use this ISO standard right here. I won't talk too much about ISO standards, but when you get into some of the weeds and metadata and we actually open up the project, you can see the different ways to actually view metadata and some of the tools attached to this. So there are people out there, just like they do parcels, you can do just metadata for a living. No one looks excited about that. Is anyone excited there? No. Benjamin doesn't look excited. Oh.
I'm excited.
Okay, good. Someone is excited. Okay. And that's kind of what I got into. Because remember that video I showed a few weeks ago about President Obama talking about, hey, you go and grab something by the horns and you be the expert at it and someone's going to notice. And that's what I did with the metadata, where, hey, Tim, this stuff's really boring, but we need someone to lead our metadata. And that's what I did. And I went and asked for raises. Sure, yeah, here's a raise. Guess why? Because you're the metadata expert. And if you left, then no one else knows it. And so that's how I kind of tried to make myself, indisposable. Yeah, indisposable. Yeah. And so those are some of the things you do. And I think people notice that. And, I think I increased my salary by like 60% by the time I left, and I left, I had enough money to go to school for a year, and not really think about money. And I was lucky in that. So when we look at the profile, these are the things that are required. These are just some of the things that are required for metadata. And as you can imagine, things like metadata point of contact, there's going to be a first name and a last name and a mailing address and a email address. And as social media and all those other things evolve, I would imagine we're going to be adding things just like services and cloud cover and things related to drones and every way that wasn't thought of back in the mid-1990s when these standards were first created. Things like spatial reference information. Is this stored as GCS or state plane? I hear Cameron talking about, hey, everything that I work with these days needs to be in state plane. Now, we don't really care about state plane because I open up a map and it all appears on top of each other. But if we put things into what we call featured data sets, well, things need to be the same projection. Featured data sets are essentially folders within a database. And typically we have those as the same themes. All our transportation, all of our utilities will be under a featured data set. Those better be in the same projection. And you're not in your head, so you guys have dealt with that before.
To recreate a whole boundary because it was under the WGS in 1984. And plus, when we project things on a map, especially with politics, people get very picky.
Yes.
Just even seeing it, because when we have these large polygons, we don't always have the exact coordinates of where they're drawn.
Yeah.
So,
That gets ugly with gerrymandering and all that stuff as well. Yeah. And so you can see the metadata creation date, metadata content, use constraints. These are some of the things in metadata. Now, these are required elements. These are optional elements. So a graphic file, access, logical consistency report. Lamont left. But what does logical consistency mean? That's kind of, and I probably alluded to this a little bit when we talked about data quality, but what does logical consistency imply?
One's gonna look similar to another.
One looks similar to the other. If I'm getting data from, do you remember logical consistency, Lamana? That's okay, a big fancy word. But if we're working with crime data from the county sheriff's office versus the city, is that gonna work? No, because they have different ways they collect the data. So they're not gonna match up just with county level data. So a lot of times when we see like county crime rates compared to each other, I kind of shrug my shoulders because they're getting those from different agencies that have different collecting standards that have different attributes. We look at this stuff and outside of the county boundary or city boundaries, it's got things like DV and weapons where that they don't collect that information inside. So I can't even look at DV stuff inside of the county, even though I can collect it outside for the types of weapons. So those are logical consistency. And so I would imagine that the crimes look different as well. So these are things that are collected, and I'm going to show something later that we've done here, but it's for state, local, federal government, and these all feed into NC1 map. You can connect to that service, NC1 map, and I believe they have a geocoder as well, a free geocoder as well. And so we can see lots of different profiles. We worked with some folks up in Alberta, Canada previously, but the standards are for you. Last thing I'm going to talk about a little bit here is part 3 here. Not this part. The last thing I'm going to talk about and mention is actually kind of working with some of the metadata that we have here. And then we're going to just go and open it up. Now I'm going to just give a couple examples of what is expected in this standard, because if you just put XXX and everything, well, it's useless. And at some point in time, we're going to create a tool that goes and flags everyone. But now this standard is just a big PDF document, and I've stored it. I've stored a link to it in the modules. But now when it says title, we went through and created this big document that said, this is what title looks like. Okay. Descriptive, unique name to convey the nature of the data at minimum, address, what, where, when, avoid acronyms. Okay, or when we do, you spell them out first, just like you do in a research paper, right? Just like we do in a research paper that we have there. So these are examples of what we have. So the actual elements and what should go there. Things like metadata scope, service types. So web mapping services, web feature services, KML files. What's KML stand for? Keyhole markup language that goes into Google Earth. REST services, CSDGM, that's the content standard. And then we have different codes. And so we have things like domain tables where that if we have a topic category, there's one of about 21 different topics that we can use here. So is it going to be farming or biota or topic categories? So we have these things called domain tables. Did you play with domain tables last week in your QA/QC stuff? What did we look at? Things like speed limits. Like these are the only values speed limits can be. Negatives aren't possible. 5, 10, 15, 20. That could be thought of as a domain table. Did anyone kind of take it further and start to kind of populate speed limits based on like user class or anything like that? I know it was a big week, but hey, if there's no speed limit there, let me look at the user class. And what are the different user classes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There was only about 7 different user classes. When I worked for the military, it was called primary, secondary, tertiary, unimproved. You only had 4 user classes, or interstate. So interstate, primary, secondary, tertiary, unimproved. Those are the 5 different values you had. And so we didn't have a speed limit in there already, and it was an interstate. What did I put in there? 65, exactly. Primary, 50. Secondary, 40. Okay, whatever. Is that going to change your calculations that much? Probably not. But it's better than having what there? Null. Okay, because we've run those null value checkers as well. And so we've got some related documents here, standards. One of the things I'm gonna talk about here is with the titles, make sure the titles are the same. This is neat because I'm gonna show you some of the stuff that Richie did, who kind of took over for the project because I had a little bit of money left over. And he got into Python programming. He ended up working for a company called Precision Hawk. Does that ring a bell? Okay, it's based out of Raleigh. They actually moved from DC down to Raleigh. Why do you think they would move from DC to Raleigh? Not only cost of living, but actually you can't really fly drones in the DC area because there's so many restrictions. So they moved down here, and he did some AIML for them before he moved out to Vancouver, Canada, to follow his significant other. But some of the things, the formats are year, dash, month, dash, day. So we can actually check to make sure this is correct, meaning the format is correct. Not necessarily if these things are actually right. And so we can start to flag these. And you're starting to see what we're thinking of. We already did this with the speed limit. We ran through and said, hey, do you have any null speed limits? Do you have any negative speed limits? What are all the different things that were messed up in speed limit that you noticed? I had a speed limit of 33. I bet you someone just probably fat fingered it and just instead of 30, it was 33. So what are some of the things that you can run these checks on to do this? And Richie wrote a really neat program. Every once in a while, people contact me for the code there. And I'm like, all right, here's the old Python code, but it's working with the previous version of Python, which doesn't work with ArcGIS Pro, and that's another issue. So if I get another grant after the last two, after these other three run off, that might be something I want to do. But things like responsible contact, what goes here? And I'll kind of go through some of these ad nauseum, but you can see some of the categories that we have right here, some of the spatial reference information. Now, this spatial reference information is typically auto-populated. So it'll say like North Carolina State Plain, the northing, the easting, or the false northing, the false easting, because it really doesn't have a true northing there. And the scopes. And so basically this big old document talks about what are all of the values that you can put in there. And it uses it as guidance. And so what Richie did was he wrote some Python that said, all these things in green, how many of these are populated correctly, and wrote them to a CSV file. And then he wrote a big HTML file that says, here's your stuff that's incorrect, go improve it. Pretty cool. Well, guess who's going to do that today? You will. Now we're just going to write it to the ArcPy messages. And you're going to say, hey, this one's correct or this one's not correct. And we can do all those checks later. And so what my goal with this code today is just kind of show you it. And we have things called metadata objects, which I'm learning about because I didn't work with metadata objects back in the day. I exported these things to XML and then exported out the XML, but I don't want to bore anyone too much. But what we're going to do here is we're going to open up the exercise. Oh, Sarah, you have a question.
Yes. Well, I was looking at your dissertation when you had it on the screen, and I saw a term that I'm not familiar with, and it was in reference to geospatial something, and it had the word newer beside it.
Okay, let me see.
And I don't know what that meant. What did you mean?
All right. So here is this monstrosity here, and I'm going to type in the word newer and see what we got here. F, newer. Positional accuracy. Let's see what else we got here.
Yeah, well, I don't know what that means. Most of the, like, I understand newer in that terms, but not when you were talking about.
Positional accuracy?
Yeah, what do you mean by
Oh,
newer?
that's just horizontal. That's just another word for horizontal and vertical accuracy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's just another way. And we can catalog that in your data, believe it or not, And we're going to look at some of the ways that we can view metadata because like I said before, my big focus today for about the next half hour is to go through and look at metadata from this project. And my last half hour is we're just going to open up my little Python code. We're going to run it and then kind of give you a charge for homework to just hey, look, just make sure something works, make sure it works. Let's check them. How many times are these populated? And so what I want to focus on right now is metadata. Now, while we're here and while I'm boring you about the metadata standard here, what I want us to do is go and open up week 11 materials. And then within the week 11 materials, I want us to open up this thing here called metadata assessment.apr. Metadata assessment.apr. So make sure it's extracted. And when you open that up, what you'll see is just a map here that's got time zones, spot elevation points, parcel IDs, admin. And these things that you see on the map don't really matter, but I want you to open this up. And while you're opening, and this is just the map, this is just a map of some feature classes that I've got there. It's not anything special or important or of any consequence, but also in week number 11, I've got the metadata elements. So what we're going to be doing today is programmatically accessing some metadata elements. This is totally different than what I did for my previous project here. And then the other thing that I have there, this is the state and local government profile that we have here. So it's about, I got to do math, so a little more than 7 years old. So we met with this committee here, but this is it, So when you start looking up, and people who maybe want to integrate, and I think I'm speaking specifically to Sarah, is that they've already gone through and done some of the research already about the history of metadata right here. Right here, this is a history of metadata right here that I didn't write. They maybe took a little bit from my dissertation, but it's got metadata. And, and I wrote 150 pages on metadata. Now, that's boring, and to me, it's exciting, but the one thing about when I did my dissertation, I'm going to go off on a tangent again, is that at no point in time, I went in and said, what should I do? What do I do next? All that other stuff. And I think a lot of times we run into problems here in our master's students, like, I don't know what to do. And if someone came to me and said, I don't know what to do, what do you think I'm going to tell them? Do this metadata. Let's do this metadata. And they're like, well, I don't want to do that. And it's like my wife. It's like, where do you want to go to eat? I don't know. Well, let's go here. Well, I don't want to go there. So it's just this kind of self-revolving vicious cycle. You know what I mean? What's so funny?
Because it's related.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yes. No, like my kids, like, we're going to take away the car if you don't have a job. Well, if I don't have a job, if I don't have a car, how am I going to get to the job? Well, I don't know. You know what I mean? You got to figure that out. But, I don't know what to say. But that's what I mean by grabbing the bull by the horns. And I think I'm just kind of pointing out or saying, this is what we want you to do, because every couple months I would give them an update, like, here's my latest stuff, here's my latest stuff, here's my latest stuff. And I have a couple people say, hey, look up this thing called TAM, Technology Acceptance Model. Hey, your statistics, I would really love for you to use PCA, Principal Components Analysis. And so come December 2009, when I was ready to defend, no one was going to sit there, like, they probably saw 6 versions of it. No point in time did they ever say, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Right now, to this day, from master's students, April the 8th, I'm getting like brand new master's theses and projects that were due last week saying, hey, Mulrooney, you need to review it so I can defend it. I'm like, well, I'm going to be in Hawaii in a week from now. Like, I'm going to be kid-free in a week from now. What do you think I'm going to be doing a week from now? Well, pina coladas on the beach or whatever I'm going to be doing. Seeing my kid, hanging out with him. Hopefully not his wife, but that's another issue. That's another issue. Okay. So he'll be alone, hopefully, but that's another issue. Okay. So all kidding aside, Meaning, make sure you kind of, and I think I'm pushing it home a little too much, but make sure you grab the bull by the horn. So all these great things that I see you do, and make sure you take the lead on those. And that's what I did with. That's kind of what I did with this here. But with this metadata document, you can see me right there. Boom, there I am. Okay, but a couple of the folks we worked with, Jeff's really good. Steve is really good. Doug, he's an open source guy, so he likes, he's very software agnostic. And these are folks, and then Sarah was the one who helped fund us, and she's gone on to a new role in a private company. But these are all just really good, really sharp people here. But this is the actual metadata standard right here. And we created templates and all this other stuff, but this tells us in green all the different examples of publication dates, data types, responsible priorities, status. You want to do a dissertation, you want to do a really good master's thesis, really, really good master's thesis, and code this in ArcGIS Pro. I think this is probably like dissertation worthy, to be honest with you. Something like this, encoding this and then figure out ways to assess and evaluate it. And that's the big thing that we all need to think of, whether we're looking at guns or food deserts or AIML. How do we assess and evaluate the performance of it? And that's, and you can see if you kind of get to the bottom of it without dying of boredom in mind, you can see exactly what I did for my assessment and evaluation piece, where that I tested people. Do you like this? Do you not like this? Is it useful? And there's something called TAM, Technology Acceptance Model, which implements what we call principal components analysis to see how well me wanting to use it is attached to people's willingness to use it. Because this whole, I want to create a cool tool. Okay, how do we evaluate it? How do we assess it? How long would it take me to do this metadata by hand versus running a little script, running a little script on it. Okay. And so this is the entire metadata standard, 29 pages of it. It's got some of these codes right here that we have. And so these are what we call domain tables. And so how often is it updated? You got one of about 6 different values. How is the date supposed to look? It's got one of about, 4 different formats that we have here. And so when we start looking at this here, this is what we've got. Now, I've just created a map here because I wanted to create a map that looked cool. But this is a map of kind of some of the different time zones and all that other good stuff. But when I go to view and catalog pane, we see over here. Now you can see my little metadata assessment tool for the database and metadata assessment for the project. So I can create metadata for the project, the APRX file, as well as the actual database. So I can loop through a database and collect metadata. Have we ever looped through a database before? Yeah. And we can just spit out how many feature classes are there. Okay, and we do this not all the time, but you already have the code there to do that. Now we're going to be doing something just slightly different. We're going to be pulling from the metadata and just say the metadata of this is this, and the metadata of this is this, and we're going to big list of things, big list of metadata, metadatas, and eventually we're going to get in a position where we can actually check those. Now, other thing we've got right here is if I go to databases and metadata assessment. Uh-oh. Got folders. Metadata assessment. All right, maybe it's under test. Okay. All right, lucky me. All right, if we go to test.gdb, so if we click on the folder called metadata assessment under test, these are all the different feature classes that I have there. Now you're getting an idea of what we're going to do is that we're going to go through each of these feature classes and pull from the metadata. How long do you think it would take you to do that by hand? A little while. Okay, and we're gonna look at how to access this metadata as well. Now, there's a couple ways to access the metadata. If I right mouse click here, I can look at view metadata. Over in the table of contents under time zone, if I right mouse click, I can click on view metadata. So there's two different ways to view the metadata. So if I looked at something like geology over in the left, now this thing is called a catalog pane. Previous versions of ArcGIS Pro had a separate application called Arc Catalog that all it did was manage your feature classes. So I can cut and paste and draw and look. These days it's kind of been inserted into ArcGIS Pro. And so these days I can right mouse click. I'm a big right mouse click person because up pops up stuff that you want to do to it. So under geology, I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to click on view metadata. And then when I've got metadata, this is all the information about it. What does geology mean? Does everyone see this information here? Yeah. It says this data set was provided to provide a geologic map of Texas for future use in spatial analysis. Click to Austin, Texas for M price for educational uses. This tells us exactly what it is. And so if I were to use this geology, would this thing be useful for the state of North Carolina? No, why not? Because you said it right here, click to Austin, Texas. The data set is a composite of 4 1 to 500,000 scale quadrangles that make up the Texas geological map. It was prepared as part of the USGS. Who are the credits? This guy, Doug, USGS, Nancy Schock, all these other people here. What are the use limitations on this? Use limitations. Hard copies shall indicate their source. Licensing fee has been modified. We've got some spatial extent right here. So our X's and our Y's right here. And then what else we have here? It says, you're currently using the item description metadata style. Change your metadata style and the options to see additional content. And so we're going to look at some of this additional content. Now, I can look at lots of things here. This is just one of the metadata elements. And typically these metadata are going to be stored within the file geodatabase, probably with in something called a blob, binary large object. I've alluded to the idea of something called XML before, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds with that. That's a separate file.
Do you think they'll be working on like to integrate like pictures into like metadata? That way you can see like over longer periods.
I would like to, and the other thing we can do is we can add pictures and give them metadata. So that the drone imagery that we create, we can just click on that drone imagery that's part of our database that has this information attached.
What a building looked like 40 years ago.
Yes, exactly. And those are the things, those are some really neat things. Yeah, that's really neat. The big problem with metadata is that people don't like creating it, but that's another issue. So I can click on like picnic shelters, and I can click on picnic shelters, right mouse click, view metadata. What is this here? You can see the picnic shelters right here. And you can see this is City of Austin. I pulled a bunch of stuff from the Mary Beth Price book, which we use as the tutorials for our undergraduate and our digital geographic classes. But we can see these. Up in the top left here. Now I've got manage. Okay. Manage right here. Let's see what we can do with the metadata. View, add database, delete. These are some things we can do with the manage. I think I've got something here called catalog. Now I can export the metadata. And then I got a little metadata here. So I can save this as an HTML file. So I've got something here called manage. Manage is going to act like me cutting and pasting new databases, mosaic data sets. I can click on catalog. And now there's a metadata tab under that. So now I can go and edit the metadata if I wanted to. I can import it from a template that I have. I can export it to a template. So if I just have some, what I call a dummy database, and just says, hey, this is what it's gonna look like, and then I'm only gonna edit. I don't need to edit the credits, I don't need to edit the summary, I don't need to edit the use limitations, but I need to change the description, I can do that. Now, in a perfect world, what I would love to do is write a script that goes and populates and updates this item description as well. I would love to do that, but I don't have the time or the resources or the money to pay someone to do that. I just have more important things to do. No offense to metadata. Okay, but I can click on edit. And if I click on edit, look what I've got here. I can go and type this. I can go and type this in here. It's got the ranges that I can save. And so right here, I can click save. And now under metadata, you can see my little XXX that I updated it with. So I can import, export, and all these. Now, the other thing that it saw, it says item description. And Mulrooney was sitting there and talking about all the different stuff that you can update. Now, this is item description because the average GIS user is only going to care about this stuff, right? That's what maybe I want to look at other stuff, but the average GIS user that we're going to be working with in our hubs is just going to want to look at this stuff here. They don't care about anything else. They don't care if it's in my hub, it better be good. I hope it's good. And so over here, I can go to project. And I'm just following the directions because I don't like to follow directions. And go to options. And I can click on metadata right here. And I'll go back to it again. So I'm going to go to project, options, metadata. Now look what I have here. Under these drop downs here, look at all that fancy stuff I have there. ISO. Okay, I've got my ISO implementation standard, ISO metadata implementation. These are more for implementations. Inspire. Does anyone know what Inspire is? That's a European metadata standard. Now, most of these standards are the same with very slight differences. So I bet you the next incarnation of ISO standards are probably going to have things with like feature services, maybe things related to drones, probably DOIs in there as well. Now, I'm not sure if actual real world metadata, real world features are going to be assigned DOIs. I don't know. I see Chima nodding his head, so I'm going to probably say yes. I'm going to refer to him on this. But when I go to these drop downs, all the stuff we were talking about before, here we are. And so most of these are the same. They're going to collect your descriptive, your structural, and your administrative information on these, but it's going to let you, when you click that edit button, it's going to got a lot more than 7 features on there. That item description is something that I can export out, bring into everything, tweak it around a little bit for each of these things, and probably 95% of the stuff that we look for, as long as we got that item description information populated, will be searchable in our hub. Now it starts to get a little more tricky where I say, hey, I want to look at all the stuff that Sarah Radel created. I want to look at all of her stuff. Now, I didn't see the word Sarah Radel or whoever else created this. Hey, I want to look at COPE project. I want to look at all the stuff related to COPE, coastlines and people, code. I want to look for this grant number. All right, this stuff starting to get a little bit more tricky here. Now we can click any one of these standards right here. Right? Any one of these standards right here. And I'm just going to click on the top one, which is the FGDC, CSDGM, metadata. So Federal Geographic Data Committee, the content standard for digital geospatial metadata. And I'm just going to click OK. Now I'm going to go back here. Now, when I click on picnic shelters, look what I got. Who wants to look at all that stuff? I can look at metadata details, thumbnails, descriptive information. Look at all this stuff here that I can import and export. Spatial data properties, geometry, Spatial reference system. Oh, look at this. NAT 83 state plane projection, all the nasty math stuff that goes into making sure this stuff lines up. And I can export these as HTML files that I can stick somewhere. Store as separate web pages. So when someone says, hey, what do you have here? Here are all these HTML files. You know, these, the lat and the long. It's got everything right here that I want. And now I can go back. Oh, let me try to. All right, let me go back to this one. Oh, look at how big this one is. But I'm looking at address points here. I can click on edit. Look what I have here under edit. Look at all these, everything in left. Item description. What do you think the red X means? More of it needs to be satisfied. Okay, and I got a contacts manager. Oh, Sarah, you are the contact in this one. I don't know how I got that there. Oh, okay. Sarah's the contact person here, and she's two of the contact people here. But you can see the details about the metadata. You can see when it was created, the date stamp. You can see the contacts for this. So if I wanted to, hey, Sarah, guess what? You're going to be the contact for this one as well. Okay. And so you can load in certain people. You can add yourself. You can create new contacts. I think that I've been just creating Sarah as the contact for all the stuff that we're doing on this particular project. You can see the use constraints. And so you can see all these new use constraints, resource constraints, data quality, new extent, new report. We can see when some of these things were created. So a lot of information here. I'm going to go refer to one of these in catalog that I know, I'm pretty sure that I created back in the day. Barbecue pits, parcels. Oh, spot elevation points. There we go. So spot elevation point. I know this one worked. View metadata. So when I worked for the military, this was the metadata that we created here. And I'm going to click on this little edit button, and you're going to see how robust some of these things were. Under data quality, oh, I guess it isn't populated. You can see the distribution information right here, the distributors, references, contacts managers, and the item description that we have here. So you can see some of the restricted use, topics and keywords. This thing gets it gets as ugly as you want to make it. But at the end of the day, the thing you don't want to say to your boss is, I don't know. I don't know. All right. So while we're here, if we go back to catalog and go up to tool sets, and me personally, I start to get a little bit lost here. So, but when we go up to catalog here, I've got a metadata assessment, okay? And I've created just a nice little tool here. And if we look at the code, and the homework tonight is going to be very, very basic. Like, make sure one feature is populated. Make sure the title, how many times is the title populated? I've got a database right there, and I'm just going to pick a database and run a report on it. I'm just going to pick a database and run a report on it. And hopefully it still works here. Okay, and I'm going to click on this thing called test. I'm just going to run it. Let's see what this thing does. All right, it hasn't given me the little X yet. When I ran the last exercise, I was running into a lock issue, so I shut it and closed it.
That's the same thing I happened to.
Yeah.
It was like a lock required.
Yeah. So I kind of X'd out of it, opened it up again, and it seemed to work. Okay, so look at these messages going on down here. And so when I open up the database for this, All right. So when I look at messages right here, oops. What did I do right here? I ran a little something that said database equals this, number of features equals 5,568, and what did I do? I just said the title. Does everyone see this right here? So I opened up admin, it said there was 5,568 features. We've done that before, right? Count the number of features. And then what I did right here, I just said title is this. Tags are this. Summary is this. Description is this. Credits is none. Access constraints is this. And it's got this div style, and I believe it's pulling from some of the HTML code. So, but the title is this for the next thing, for area codes. You see what I did right there? And all I did was just write it to the output. I could easily open this thing up and write it to a file, write it to an HTML file, write it to whatever else. I'm going to show you what we did before. And so if we look at this, look at all the messages. It created like 571 messages. But if I go to my catalog and right mouse click and click edit, look how little code created this. That big program was created using this code. Pretty simple, right? Now, what's the only thing that I did here? And these are things that we've already done before. Now we have this intro information here, but what do we have? The database equals get parameters is text. Remember that? Whatever database you click on, that's what we're looking at. My workspace, I'm just going to type it in, convert it to a string. The data sets are going to be equal to feature classes. And then what do I do? For feature class in list feature classes, all I'm going to do is add the title. I count the number of features, and I create something brand new here called a metadata object. This is the first time I had ever done this for this program. And then the metadata object is going to have certain properties. Because remember, up top there, we have something called like get count management. That's just a command that says get the number of features from that. Get the number of features from that database. And so I get argpy. And then we're looking at right here, argpy add messages string item underscore metadata dot typo, item underscore metadata dot tags, item underscore metadata dot summary. All we're going to be doing is just pulling from that particular feature class. And then we're going to go back and do it over and over and over again. Now I got a question here. Let's see who wants to make eye contact. Who wants to make eye contact? Okay. And my question is, and for the homework is, hey, can you go through a database and count the number of times that the title is none? I bet. And report back to say, hey, for this feature class, this database that probably has 50 features in it, how many of them have a none in the title? Because that's something we're going to have to address, because when we open up the metadata in the item description, I don't want to see a none. Who wants to see a none? Not me. And so these are all pulled from the item description. And that's not an accident. So these are all pulled from the item description. Who wants to count the number of times that it doesn't have tags? Because I want to see things like county, Guilford County, crime, things, county outline, so that when I go to my metadata, I go to my hub, or I go to my organization and I can type in keywords, these things are going to start popping up, so I don't have to go and create the water quality stations that are already sitting there. Because no one populated the metadata. How many people think that they can write an if statement that just counts the number of times null appears for any one of these? Everyone should raise their hand, right? Didn't we just do that? If something is none, if something is not none, right? Didn't we do this? Not for metadata, but for what? Cells. Exactly. Or they call them cursors, actually, right? You already did this. You already did the hard part last week, a couple weeks ago. Where now you were going through an actual feature class and going down all the cursors. Now you're just going through each of the feature classes and pulling from the title, tag, summary, description, credits, and access constraints. That's what you're doing. You're just pulling from the item description. And so that little program created all of this. Look at that. That's pretty cool, huh? Now, what am I really want to do here? And for the homework, and I'll revisit the homework here in a little bit, but what I really want to do is just, I want to see how many times I see the word none. That's all I want to do. And I don't want to see that for all of them, just one of those titles, tags, or item description that way. If you want to do it for all of them, that'd be great. But I don't mind. Now, I'm going to take a few minutes here, show a project that we did with a kid named Richie. This guy, a guy named Richie. But show a project that we did with Richie where we went and did this big time for our catalog, and then we'll talk about the homework. And the homework should be really basic, but just being able to edit this code. Now with Richie, I did this in ARC catalog. So you can see this little, I call it the Richie tool right here. And assess metadata. And now this assess metadata, I've got a database, an output file, an output XML folder, and an error file so that I could write every single error to a separate file. And I'll just kind of show you the code that we created because this code is really, really big. But this is the code we created where what we tried to do was adhere to not count the item description, but that big nasty document that we created back in 2016. So we wrote a tool that did this. And so this was like a nice semester project where we said how many errors were in the title, how many errors were in the publication date, how many errors were in the abstract, status, search keywords, X, Y, extent beginning, everything. And so you can see what we did here. Now you can see we have export. The one thing about this is that I'm still trying to figure out how to access the publication date in the new version of ArcGIS Pro. I don't know how to do it. It should be easy, right? I don't know. But it should be just something like pub_date.item, but it's not there. It doesn't work. And so the previous incarnations of ArcGIS Pro is that we had to export these files. First thing I did is I went and exported all the metadata to a XML file. XML is just independent of the database. So I just stored a bunch of stuff in an XML file, and from here all I did was just read from the XML file as opposed to the metadata. That's it. That's it. And I counted the number of times it appeared. Now, other things that I did. Look what I did here. I just said, hey, number of elements equals to 1. I did something called tree find. What do you think tree find? Just go through the tree and I look for something called ID info, citation, site info / title. And so each of those 415 metadata elements have their own unique location using this tree find. And what do you think I did? I just said, hey, the title is equal to this. If it is, and I also replaced the comma with a space. Why do I replace the comma with a space? That's toughy. So the first thing I did was I replaced the comma with a space. What's a CSV? What does CSV stand for? Comma separated file. So if it sees something in a title with a comma, it might want to move it over to different columns. So I just said, all right, let's make this. And all I did was, if the title is not none, write it out, because I was just scared if I'm writing stuff to CSV files and it sees a comma, it's going to move it over instead of keeping it in the same thing. Else, make it none, and then I'm going to write it to an HTML file and say, hey, make it red. Does anyone notice these tags right here? And I'll point these out for people joining us online. But these things right here, this is HTML file, because up in the top right here, up in the top right here, well, you wrote out the HTML file here. I'm going to write it to an error file, which is HTML. I'm going to write the output to a CSV file. And so I can do these open commands, which create brand new files here. And so you can see some of the brand new libraries that I had to bring in. But next, let's see what else I did here. The title is none. Look at the publication date. If the publication date is not none, we'll replace the commas, and then I'm just going to make sure it starts with a 1 or a 2. I'm going to make sure it's got the right length. I'm going to make sure it's got a length of 8 for year, month, day. Otherwise, it's going to say, hey, the publication date isn't listed. It's in the wrong format. So you can see I've got about 4 or 5 different checks there after none. And I wrote it. Okay, responsible party. Is it none? You know, and I can look at online linkage. Hey, I got to make sure it starts with a 0 or starts with an HTTP or starts with a www. And so Richie, he went through and hard coded that whole document so that we could go and create something like, I swear I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to output. Oh, not that one. Come on. I really know what I'm doing. Let's see if this is it. This is the CSV file that we wrote. That got ugly quickly. Here we go. It's here somewhere. That's all I know. And they liked it. So, error file. Yes. We wrote an HTML file. It told us, and then we turned this into an HTML file that put in red and orange in proper format or stuff that was missing. And so we went through and created a big file that said, all this stuff is missing. Really, really neat stuff. You know, to me, I see a lot of value in this. A lot of value, a lot of checks. Pretty neat stuff. But when we ran it, the online linkage is missing from this feature class. So to NCDOT, hey, NCDOT, run our tool, and they give you a list of all the stuff that's missing. Give you a list of all the stuff that's written to a file. Let me find the CSV file. And while we were here, we wrote it straight to this. So this is all the metadata sitting right there where I went and calculated the percent correct. This is a prior run here because it's using the old version of ArcGIS Pro. But now I can see, hey, look at temporal accuracy. I got a bunch of nuns here. These all look calculated. The use constraints are here. online linkage, I got some nuns here, I got some nuns here, I got some nuns here. How long do you think it would take to do for 13 feature classes to go through and do this? Probably an hour. And so when I worked for the military, that was my job this was just for one database. Where my boss said, hey, we've got about 100 feature classes here. Figure out how old this stuff is. Where's the old? Metadata date. There should be something right here. Oh, it looks like I ran this before. That's pretty cool. Metadata date. I thought there was a temporal accuracy. Well, look how old I don't even know some of this stuff here. And so my boss would do this, hey, for all 100 military installations, which have about 100 feature classes in them, go figure out which ones have all the nulls or missing stuff so that we can visit it. It would take me about a day just to go and populate this by just cut, paste, cut, paste, cut, paste, cut, paste. You think you're cutting and pasting? Guess what you should be doing? You should be figuring out a way to hard code this. Okay? Figure out, and you notice I hard coded the databases. I put C : instead of doing the get parameters. Because I could have done that get parameter that we have for this one. Just click on the feature class and whatever feature class you want to do, it'll do. But just think about how much time it would take to do this. Wow. I'm still patting myself on the back for doing this. I'm just kidding. Okay. But this is what I hope someday, or maybe that day has already come, where you have the fire to do something like this within your scope of work here. And it's not fun, it's not exciting, but there's a lot of value in this. And so I'm hoping to get to a point in time where I can click on that database that we just opened up, and this whole thing is going to be populated, tells me which feature class had the most, which feature class was the best on the right, versus which attribute was best on the left. And we can just run these and run these and run these and run these. A lot of these here. And I don't want to go through that metadata editor because you know what? Esri still hasn't even created training for the metadata editor. You know that? Try to. I was going to assign it to you for this week. You know, you didn't get it assigned this week because they didn't even have it yet. And I don't want to make you go back and do the old version of stuff just for busy. I don't want to do that. Okay. All right, let's look at the homework here. You can tell I get excited about this because this was my thing. You know, I kind of brag or talk or whatever. You know, it took me 5 semesters to do my dissertation. Why? Because found a niche that could work there. All right, so let's look at the homework. I don't want to waste anyone's more time because we got that final exam. We got the final project that we're working on as well. All right, so when we look at the downloads, week 11, let's just look at exercise number 9, and it looks like we've largely got the charge for it here, but what we're going to do here, during class today, we looked at some Python code. What we're going to do, you want to agglomerate statistics for just one element that you're checking on according to the state and local government standard. So look at the title, look at the description, look at the tags, and I just want you to agglomerate statistics. It could be percent correct. As you go through, you count the total number versus the total correct, and you calculate the percent from that. I hope we all can. And that's all we're going to do. You pick one. So that code that I just gave you, all you're going to do is just add a couple of if statements to that and see if they're populated. And while you're seeing if they're populated, you're going to count the number correct or the number incorrect versus the total. Did I already count the total number of features in there? I already did. You know, I already did. Now, what I want us to do is count the total number of, and probably somewhere in all that, the total number of features in the database, so that A, for title, 47 out of the 57 had the title populated. Let me go back again. Description had 57 out of the 57 populated. And you only need to do it just for one of those from the item description that intersects with our state and local government standards. So I want you to kind of get familiar with that state and local government standard, because you're going to be the one someday creating those SOPs, standard operating procedures. You're going to be the one creating that technical documentation. And if you're really lucky, you're going to be making big bucks to write Python code to make sure people's stuff adheres to that. Now, why are you lucky? Because you get to be a programmer, you start to get big bucks. Yeah, big bucks. All right. So I'm not going to be here next week. And I'll mention I'll talk about the next assignment in an announcement when I post all this stuff here, or probably at the beginning of next week, because I'll be where I'm going to be by that time. But we got a lot of stuff to do. We've got this Python code. A couple people had some outstanding exercise 8 stuff, so just make sure you get that into me. And so that's fine with me, because that was pretty tough. And so we're just going to be building on this Python code and going from there. All right, I'll stop here. Is there any questions? Chima, you got a question?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, based on your dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
So
He's asking about my dissertation. I'm just talking to people here.
so I was looking at your metadata marks.
Oh yes,
Research model.
metadata assessment and reporting tool. Yes.
You designed that.
Oh yes, I designed it. Of course, yes.
So how were you able to measure, because what you were trying to assess was something qualitative?
Yes. All right.
So how were
He
you
did-
able to measure the metrics?
Chima had a good question. Chima has a good question about, basically, I created something in there called MART, Metadata Assessment and Reporting Tool. What you're looking at right here is MART. Okay. And what Chima said, well, how do you assess and evaluate it there? And that was my big question. And I
Yeah.
ran something called TAM, Technology Acceptance
yeah.
Model.
Sorry, I'm not muted, sorry.
Okay. Created something called Technology Acceptance Model, because that's what one of my advisors said. Oh, this looks great. We can look at statistics. And I did this in the open source environment, and you can see this. But this is just based on the data. So I created this thing called TAM, where I had 50 people or 40 people go and use it, and they rated it on a Likert scale from 1 to 6 or 1 to 7. Likert scale is how likely are you to use it? Do you find it easy to use? Would you use this again? All this other stuff. And I used something called principal components analysis and I'll show exactly where this is here. But the thing that we wanted to look at here was I used this principal components analysis to see how well people liked it right here. And this is just TAM. This isn't anything I invented or whatever, where that you see all these statistic stuff. This is what people wanted to look at here. So I wanted to rate, this is, it was so long ago, I forget a lot of it. So, but I use these statistics right here. How often do you use a computer, use software, develop GIS data, work on metadata? The kind of some basic statistics here. These basic statistics are good, but people are going to care about how well do these users look at the median score, the average score, the lower mean, the upper mean, where I ask these questions. And I took this straight from the research, because I don't know too much about this, So I used this TAM, and then I ran it through this Chromebax. I think that's an alpha, where I get these metrics to look at the reliability of it. And I do some pairwise with each of these here to get this thing right here. That's it. That's all I did. So I ran some descriptives. I did a lot of research on TAM because someone said, I like this. This is cool, but how are you going to assess and evaluate it? Because I could have said, the tool's going to run really fast. And if I had people go and point and click, it would take them 17 hours to do it versus 7 minutes. No duh. That's why I'm here. And so they use this. This isn't anything groundbreaking that I invented.
How to, for instance, for the hub, where we're trying to study
Yeah.
outreach, engagement,
Yep.
awareness, education, how can I use this model?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, how are you going to use the model?
What he asked?
How are you going to use a model like this for assessment and evaluation? Now, one of the things, and I'll give this, tell you, Chima and Sarah, is that we already have advanced analytics, right? And the other thing I did this, I also used deep learning stuff to figure out, hey, when we looked at the feature classes, when none was populated, when this attribute wasn't populated, neither was this. So I could go and do like quick searches to see which ones weren't working as well. But one of the things we have advanced analytics that say, hey, people are downloading this more than this, more than this, more than this, and the average engagement time on each of these resources, which is probably, 60 or 70 within the hub. So you've got these reports for each of the individual resources within them. And so one of the things you could do is that, hey, take my survey down below. What resource did you use? And you can create something like this for each of these, or you can create it for the entire hub.
For the Cope Hub, we use Azure.
Mm-hmm.
That is it's Azure Power Automate, but it reports errors, right?
Yeah.
So errors in searching and discoverability, or errors in
Yeah.
anything, right? When people are looking for stuff, and I get that report on a weekly basis.
And that we could probably get something like that as well. Okay, I don't know what those look like, but this is 15 years old now, literally 15 years old. So TAM would be a good way to go to assess and evaluate, because I'll just like all the analytics in your dissertation, but someone's probably going to want something that's got p-values and all that other stuff attached to it. And so even when we've got people doing the guns or the food deserts or food accessibility, they're going to want something above and beyond the statistics. And I think you'll probably, you all with the guns and everything will probably get into the whys, the why questions a little bit more, where you're going to have surveys, which you're going to be able to go and answer these questions where that, if you're this age and this gender, you're going to be more likely to commit a gun crime or more, whatever, with that using this stuff as well. So I'm not too worried about that. Yes.
If you use TAM to validate the natural learning models, could I use TAM to evaluate the validity, accessibility, and reliability of artificial intelligence?
I don't know. That's a good question. You might want to Google that one, because I just used it and went on. So, yeah, that'd be a good question. I think that would be a good topic for research. So,
Yeah, I'll write that down.
okay. All right. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Yeah, so about the Richie tool.
Can this be used in any, is it agnostic? Like,
Yeah. Well, and I'm